Okay, hi everybody. I know everybody's busy and I want to make sure that we have enough time to get through this and to cover the subject really well. So we'll go ahead and get started. I've been really looking forward to this presentation from Dr. Pat Clark, here to talk about a subject I've seen a lot of confusion over, which is the differences between Pico and Q-switch lasers for tattoos and pigment and melasma and skin rejuvenation. So I'm going to let Pat take over in just a minute, but I want to tell you a little bit about myself. If you don't know me, my name is Don Berryhill. I've worked in the medical laser industry in various capacities for over 25 years. I'm an independent consultant. I don't work for any company. As a consultant, a coach, trainer, basically I help laser buyers and laser users become better educated consumers. So my services include advanced laser training, analysis, comparison of various lasers, doing research, providing options for equipment service, marketing, financing, etc. And I can also, and this is very important this time of the year, I can teach you how to become a master negotiator and often save thousands of dollars when dealing with these big companies, and oftentimes a high pressure sales rep and so on. So please think of me as your first call for anything laser. If I can help you, I will find somebody who can, and you can learn more at lasercoach.com. So now I am pleased to turn it over to Pat Clark. He's one of the most knowledgeable people that I know in this industry, and he's my go-to guy for anything really technical. And I thought he'd be the perfect person to talk about these kinds of lasers. So what we're going to do, Pat is going to do his presentation, and then you can type in questions. But if you would, we'll hold him till the end, and his presentation won't take long to get through. But I think it'd be great to ask questions. So Pat?
Perfect. Good evening. Well, Pat couldn't make it, and I just happened to be walking by this office, so I thought I'd just come and sit down and say hello to you folks. And
you'll do.
Of course. So good evening to everyone. I see familiar names or familiar faces out there. The question I love from the very start, I'm gonna open up my presentation so you can see it. I get this little guy going, and we'll start right there. Perfect. Let's scroll back up to the top.
Pat, do you want to just a little bit about your background in this crazy industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been around for 35 years. My goodness, what have I not been involved with in 35 years? I founded the UT Southwestern Medical Center program, which is about 135 lasers on any given day. I started at the University of North Carolina in working with neurosurgery and cancer therapy with lasers. I was on the team that did the first lap coles in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York back in the early 1990s. Was a co-founder of the second med spa in the United States in Dallas, Texas in about 1997 or 98. Been around for a long time, worked with lots of manufacturers, have a stack of NDAs that looks like the old family Bible, and have had the good fortune with some of you to actually be in the practice we do and work. But I consult with not only the manufacturers, but kind of like Don, I'm here to support for anything you may need, whatever you may need it. So let's, from there, let's get started. So Q-switch technologies. Go ahead, Don.
No, go ahead. You got it.
Yeah, Q-switch technology. I love the question about what's the difference between a Q-switch laser and a picosecond laser. And the answer is they're both Q-switch lasers. Q-switching is an old electronic term. If you have what we call a free pulse or long-running laser, then lasers are pulsing in milliseconds. There are four things that make a laser work. There's the cavity, the laser itself, something to excite that medium, and then two mirrors to direct photons. And if you hide one of those, usually it's the back mirror, the laser cavity goes to full excitation, loaded with photons. And when you expose the mirror, they dump in an extremely rapid pulse. So there's normal pulsing, there's Q switching, and then in fact, there's mode locking, which is a single pass the photons through there. So we're going to take a look at nano and pico technologies, because nano has been around for a while and pico is something that's still fairly new. So why are we not going to the next slide? Okay, good. History of the devices. 1963, there was a Yugoslavian clinic that tested a Q-switch laser to prove that it was not X-ray. everyone says, ooh, light amplification by stimulating emission of radiation. It must be a radiological device. Oh my gosh, it's going to be, mutagenic like X-rays. No, they proved back in 1963 it was just light, non-ionizing light, not anything else. First clinical application was for exogenous pigment, things like nevus of Oda, nevus of Ito, melasma, cafe au lait. So I love when people say, wish there was a tool for melasma, and we've had a tool for melasma since 1963. If you look at the process from there, Dr. Leon Goldman, you're probably aware May 24th, 1960 was the introduction of the ruby laser. And the first physician to use the ruby laser at Cincinnati Children's Hospital was Dr. Leon Goldman in 1961. He used, in 1967, it's a correction there, 1967, he used a Q-switched YAG and a Q-switched ruby laser to treat a patient's tattoo to see what was going to happen. And so, we're off to the races. Goodness, we're chasing tattoos as early as 1967. So to be in the nanosecond or picosecond range and seek smaller targets or to create a photoacoustic effect. Okay, let's talk about what that means. A little frightening, at least to me. We started using lasers clinically in 1961, but we simply borrowed industrial lasers. We simply borrowed industrial lasers, tried them. If they worked, great. And if they didn't, well, that's okay. Until 1983, and Dr. Rox Anderson at Harvard University came up with the idea of selective photothermolysis. He said that there are 4 controlling things that allow us to use light clinically in a controlled fashion. Wavelength, power and spot size, and time. Wavelength, seeking the target, power and spot size, determining how hot the target's going to be, and time, determining the exposure time of that energy as it comes in contact with tissue. You've been to the fancy dinner party where someone has the champagne flute and they wet their finger and walk it around the edge of the champagne flute, and when they do, the champagne flute sings. That's called harmonic resonance. Harmonic resonance, if we record that tone from the glass, play it back to the glass through a speaker, not by volume, but by pure tone, the glass will vibrate so violently it'll explode. That's what we're doing with laser light. Laser light is monochromatic, a very fixed wavelength. We can feed it into tissue, find a wavelength that matches a chromophore in tissue, oxyhemoglobin, pigment, whatever it may be, something exogenous like tattoo ink, and it will selectively heat only that thing, just like it will selectively affect only that one champagne flute that we recorded the tone from. So that's the cool thing about lasers. Power and spot size are going to focus the energy through a lens, just like we focus the sun's energy through a magnifying glass down to create more heat, to create something usually in a thermal response, but clearly the thermal response is fast enough, it creates an acoustic change in that process. Time is the most critical thing. Time are going to be portions of a second. To find the ideal time of a pulse for a target, you simply square the dimension of the target in microns, and it's going to give you the reaction time. So let me give you an example. I said the first application was for organic pigment, right? A melanocyte averages 2 to 7 microns in dimension. If you square those, then the ideal pulse time for impacting a melanocyte would be 4 to 49 nanoseconds as a pulse time. Keep that number in mind. Let's just hold 4 nanoseconds in the back of our mind as we take a look at nanosecond and picosecond lasers and what's going to happen there. So if we have extreme energies in extremely short periods of time, we photoacoustically, we photothermally warm so fast that we get a photoacoustic, photokinetic change in our target, like a blob of tattoo ink. We superheat it, it explodes. We superheat pigment, it explodes. So we're getting a photokinetic, a photothermal response in what we're trying to do. So ideal application for a Q-switch laser, I think either nano or pico. There are 3. Number 1, disruption of tattoo ink. I always tell the patient, we're not going to remove your tattoo. You are. We're simply going to help you by breaking up the ink. Photoacoustic retraining of native melanin. Again, we know we can treat nevus of Oda, nevus of Ito, melasma very well with a Q-switch laser. And last but not least, and I think this is where Picos have really shown their ability to shine over a nanosecond laser, is photoacoustic remodeling of skin structure. We now are really big on rejuvenation and repair of skin, and I think the picosecond plays a real role in that process. So 4 wavelengths for tattoo ink. We know the 1064 laser has been out there for a long time. It's invisible. We can't see it. Therefore, it only looks for the darkest of things, and it looks for collections of the darkest of things. So if we're careful, we can even treat a tattoo within dark skin, because we can get the laser to selectively look for the ink and not for the color of skin. But we know realistically there are 4 possible colors to use with a laser: the 1064 native neodymium YAG, a frequency double neodymium YAG at 532, and then there are dye handpieces at 585 and at 650. If you look at the color wheel, then those handpieces, those colors are responding with their color opposite. So by example, green looks for red, yellow looks for blue, red looks for green. So we know that if you have pale blue, pale green, or what I call the spring and fall colors, oranges, yellows, light greens, light blues, you're going to need those yellow and red handpieces to really master what you're trying to do. Otherwise, you tell the client from the beginning, if we only have 1064 and 532, we can treat most dark things and we can focus on reds, but your pale greens, your blues, your lavenders, we're going to have a challenge going after those things. So I think when you're looking for Q-switch lasers, picosecond or nanosecond, the criteria first is not how fast is the pulse. The criteria is, can you treat all colors? Do you have the capability of having all 4 colors at your control to be able to cover the full spectrum of exogenous tattoo ink? So again, the 4 wavelengths: neodymium YAG, KTP, yellow in the 570s and red in the 630s, absolutely help us do the things we need to do. So if we're looking for native pigment, again, 1963, there was a study in low nanosecond pulse times. It can change native pigment, but more importantly, can retrain the melanocyte. There is a really interesting paper out in the last 18 months that said melasma is a failure of the basal layer. Pigment should be along the DE junction, the basal layer, and when that basal layer fails, then the floor kind of falls out of the basement and kind of scatters the pigment producing ability into the tissue, and that's where melasma may come from. If that's true, then we know picosecond, nanosecond a little bit, but picosecond can rebuild, refortify the basal layer. More importantly, it can retrain melanocytes. The ideal time to be doing that is in nanoseconds, something equal to or more than 4 nanoseconds, so we don't destroy the melanocyte, but we can simply retrain the melanocyte. That, in fact, is the drawback of a picosecond laser. You have to be very careful in a picosecond laser in any skin of color, because if you're in the picosecond range, you're anywhere from 100 to 1,000 times faster than the pulse time that's going to destroy a melanocyte. When they came out a number of years ago, almost a decade ago, I warned that they were going to be careful about hypopigmentation, the process of removing tattoos. And now we know, of course, there are class action lawsuits where manufacturers didn't warn users of that. So the great advantage of Pico is it's great for remodeling tissue. The caution is you have to be very careful in skin of color about how you use it, because it will hypopigment the patient permanently. Good. Photoacoustic remodeling is absolutely real. If you go back to laser genesis from 1998, Dr. Christine Lee in Walnut Creek, California, came up with the idea of using just slow running millisecond neodymium YAG and 532 KTP to chase dyschromia, reds and browns, and to revitalize skin in a process that's still used today by a lot of manufacturers. Q switching, picosecond pulses, take that to a new level, to a whole new level of finesse, a whole new level of ability in the process of doing that. So this is not something new. This is a step up on something we've known about for over almost 25 years. Polishing, if you want to use carbon, if you want to do a Hollywood peel or a carbon peel, if you're not familiar with those, nanosecond or picosecond pulses can do that. It's a nice polishing of the stratum corneum in any skin type. Picosecond lasers do it better than nanosecond lasers do. They're kind of a step up in that process. But the nice thing about that is, number one, there's no downtime. Number two, you can do it on any skin of color. I like to say not skin of color, but brown eyes. Brown-eyed patients versus blue-eyed patients, that's a big differentiation. Picosecond lasers work very well for that. So know the device pulse time. Some devices out there, Michelle Bowers kind of cheats the process because I know she's got a laser that is both nano and picosecond in its ability. Nanosecond lasers, absolutely wonderful. There is nothing wrong with a nanosecond laser. Picosecond lasers were touted as removing tattoos 3 to 4 times faster. That's just not borne itself out. Can it remove a tattoo a little bit faster? Yes, but you have to be careful not to create more trauma in the process at each treatment. So if you don't know about the Kirby Decide chart, look in Google Kirby Decide. You'll find out that there is a calculator, an evaluator that helps you determine how many treatments it's going to take to clear a tattoo for a patient based on amount of color, the colors of the ink, the location in the body, the Fitzpatrick skin type, layering and scarring, and a number of other things. Nanosecond lasers are excellent at that. Picosecond lasers are also excellent at that. A little bit more caution in working with skin of color, but picosecond lasers have now proven themselves not to be the ideal tattoo laser that it was touted to be, but moreover, an excellent laser for tissue remodeling, skin repair, skin rejuvenation. So stable, nanosecond laser stable in production for over 40 years. There's little pioneer risk. You know what you're buying. You know the reliability. Picosecond lasers are newer. They are sexier. They have more draw for patients and clients. Remember, they can be more fragile. Lasers, only medicine puts wheels on lasers. Any other industry, any other process, any other business that uses lasers bolts them to the floor. Tattoo lasers, picosecond lasers, Q-switch lasers should not be moved from facility to facility. They shouldn't be really moved from room to room. You should find a room where you want to settle down with your Q-switch laser and it should stay there. Picosecond lasers are even more sensitive to motion, being rattled around. If you have a 2-joule box, which is a nice, powerful box, you'll hear that term if you look into these devices, 1-joule or 2-joule peak power boxes. If you have a 2-joule box and it goes out of alignment, it's going to eat about $40,000 worth of optics before you figure out it's not working right. So they're very sensitive, more fragile. Nanosecond lasers fragile, picosecond lasers very fragile devices. The bottom line is both are excellent. Picosecond, again, more sex appeal, maybe a little better advantage in the speed, in the numbers of treatments that you're going to do, much better at skin rejuvenation, but more caution with skin of color. So be wise. Which device is going to meet your patient client base? Which is going to meet your budget? Not only in initial cost, and there aren't many consumables out there that go with these things. The dye handpieces will need to be renewed if you have a yellow or red handpiece. You may be buying a little carbon cream, which, my goodness, it's like what, $25 a tube for 30 or 40 patients. But maintenance on these devices, you may have a hair laser that you've run for 10 years without a problem. You're going to find that Q-switch lasers are a little more sensitive and like to have a little bit more attention. So you may be asking for a service call once a year. But the bottom line is, which meets your demand? Which of those devices, nanosecond or picosecond, are going to meet your devices? They're both excellent. You've got to make a decision in what meets the needs of your practice, what's going to meet the needs of your patient requirements. With that, I'm going to stop. I will step back and we will take questions.
Pat, I'm gonna start with a couple. A lot of what I see is people, when they're trying to decide to buy these lasers, it's cost, it's their budget. They don't want to spend. When Picos first came out, they were $300,000, and I talked to a doctor early who said, "I need to buy another Q-switch laser." And I go, "Why? You just bought a $300,000, And she says, "Well, I need something to take the reds out." And he's like, "You didn't know?" Yeah. So, but the prices have come down on those, but I still see that gap typically between Picos and Q-switch, and then Q-switches with dye kits, maybe a little bit less expensive. Those Boyocon Bio, the Medlight C6s have been around forever, but they're just 2 wavelengths. Do you think that's a good way to go, or somebody at least needs to get a dye kit to get those other wavelengths, or just go ahead and spend the money and get a 4-wavelength?
Well, and Don, you'll probably remember just from friends you and I have that worked for Con Bio for years, that even the old C6 gosh, from 1984, 1985, had red and yellow handpieces available for it. So it's not you're gonna get what you pay for. And if you're going to buy the highest scientific technology, it's going to cost you money. If you want to buy a picosecond laser that's going to be a reliable picosecond laser, not something you bought from Alibaba on the internet from China, it's going to cost you a bunch of money. A nanosecond laser will cost you less, but shop out there. But more importantly, again, if I can drive home any point, don't concern yourself with pico versus nano. Concern yourself with exactly what we just talked about. Do you have the ability to treat all the colors in the rainbow? And if you don't, are you really going to be able to satisfy that patient? We can get rid of most of that tattoo, but the yellows and the oranges and the light blues and the light greens, they're just not going to go away. Is that going to be okay with you? Probably not. So don't get hung up on speed between pico and nano. Get hung up on the abilities of the device. And can it deliver at least 2, if not 3 or 4 different wavelengths for treatment?
Yeah, and that reminds me, I was in on doing a tattoo day with a doctor one time, and there was a lady that came in, an older lady, and she had a tattoo of a frog on her butt, and it was this green frog, and she said, "Will this get rid of my frog?" And the doctor said, "No, but we can maybe make it look like a faint bruise. Would you be happy with that?" She said, "Yes, because every time I look at it, it reminds me of my husband because he made me get it." So I think it's important just to know what you can and can't do, especially with these kind of lasers.
Oh, absolutely. And again, remember, it's wavelength, energy, and the ability to treat targets. The ability to treat targets is the tantamount thing. If you can't treat the different colors, your example was perfect. You just spent $300,000 for a laser that can't treat everything. My goodness, maybe your selection tools weren't what they needed to be.
Mm-hmm. Pat, too, I heard this a while back, and maybe you can confirm this, that Q-switch lasers are the most popular lasers sold in the Far East because it's the best thing to treat Asian skin for pigment lesions because they hyperpigment so well. Is that pretty much what you've seen?
Oh, absolutely. There are those out there who still say, "I don't want to buy a new one. I'll go buy a used one." You're not going to find a used Q-switch laser because they get sucked to the Asian countries very, very quickly. Yeah. Because remember we talked about native lesions. The first thing that came up was nevus of Oda and nevus of Ito, which are predominantly Asian lesions, and the Asians, especially the Japanese, are very big about lesions on your skin being a stain on your soul. So yeah, those devices get sucked off to the Asian countries very quickly.
And for that, just that 1064-532 is fine. You don't need the other colors. So if it's pigment laser, or if it's for skin rejuvenation. And that reminded me of something else when you said a Hollywood feel. I talked to a doctor in Los Angeles who had bought 2 of the Picos when they first came out, and they were super expensive. I said, "So you must be doing a lot of tattoo removal." He goes, "No, I'm doing a lot of skin rejuvenation." He goes, "These are great for that." And that's all we use it for. So I think that's one of the big things that people don't realize with these Picos and the right kind of nano second lasers is that skin rejuvenation market is great. The tattoo market, it's a weird market. Some people do really well and some people don't,
Well, and there are always maxims out there, and they are just that. They're just maxims. But most good advisors will tell you that a tattoo laser is good for a population of about 250,000 people. And if you're in a town of more than 250,000 people, then a second tattoo laser in town is not going to do anybody any good because there's just not enough people to go around. But yeah, that skin rejuvenation, absolutely marvelous. And if you have people, if they love IPL, IPL is great, but IPL is Fitzpatrick 1 through 3, maybe 4, right? Mm-hmm. If you have a Q switch, especially if it has a fractional handpiece, then you're good up through Fitzpatrick 5, and you can treat them much more safely and effectively. Remember, if you're doing it in picosecond or nanosecond pulses, you're not flushing pigment to the surface, you're fractionating and dissolving pigment. So it's a different endpoint to teach the patient to look for, but commonly a much safer process, especially if you can be in the nanosecond range.
Yeah, if an office is going to be doing a lot of skin rejuvenation, I think having at least a Q switch is a great thing to have in the mix, because it's almost like the secret ingredient in the soup sometimes that makes that skin rejuvenation as good as you could get it. So maybe you do IPL and then you work in some Q switch and you do this and you do that, and you stack treatments, whatever.
And the easiest sell for me when you're talking to people about what do I want, does it work well on native browns? Yeah, it works pretty well on native browns. Did it work well on native reds? Maybe. But bottom line is, if it's rejuvenating skin, you have dyschromies today that you didn't have when your skin was 20 years younger. And if we can revitalize your skin and make it 20 years younger, it's going to self-resolve many of those issues.
Yeah, and Q switch lasers as skin rejuvenation, it hurts to do tattoos. There's no question. It's really painful because you've got this major heat sink of this ink super heating up. But for skin rejuvenation, it's really comfortable. It's
Absolutely.
numbing cream. People can come in and go. It's the lunchtime skin thing, so it's great for that.
Oh yeah, your greatest challenge is that client who comes in, our patient who comes in and says, if it doesn't hurt, it didn't work. Because if you're just doing skin rejuvenation and you're doing a carbon or a Hollywood peel that has a very low threshold of discomfort, they're hard pressed to believe that it's really working for them until they see the outcomes.
Yeah. So anyway, anybody else? I'm hogging the questions. Anybody else have any questions? No, not so far.
Well, terrific. It looks like we've got a great group here. That's nice to see.
Yeah. What else was I going to ask you? Yeah, I see, Pat, when I first got in this business, when they had the photoderm, and remember it had the screen on there that every color of tattoo you could treat, purple, it was just pulse light, and it was just burning the patient. And I remember, you may have been there, they had this guy that had a tattoo covering his entire back. It was an eagle and his wings were touching here, and they tried to do his whole back with pulse light. It was crazy. When people see people with doctors or people that have med spas see people with tattoos like that, they think, oh my God, this is great, man. They look at all these tattoos out here. But what I've seen, and maybe you can elaborate on this, is it's usually the smaller tattoos that people regretted. If you see somebody with a lot of tattoos, they're all in. They're not going to get those taken off. They're like going to get more probably. Is that kind of what you've seen, or?
Well, I get a couple of things. First of all, if it's black ink, you clearly stand a much better chance of resolving it. But everyone needs to understand, even if you had all 4 wavelengths to treat all colors of a tattoo resolution is usually only about 75 to 80%. You'll still have a dusting of that tattoo. And people need to be aware that these pictures they show you again and again about, oh, we did 4 treatments and look, they're all gone. No, that's not true.
Yeah.
That's a rare circumstance. And the thing to keep in mind is, where on the body is it? Because if it's on extremities, if it's on fingers, if it's on toes and ankle or wrist, it's much harder to get rid of than if it's on your shoulder or happen to be on your back or your bottom. So.
Yeah. Oh, very good. I guess if there's no other questions, we'll keep this short and sweet. And so I want to thank everybody for joining us. Pat, I want to thank you.
Absolutely my pleasure. And anytime anyone needs to reach to me, you can reach to me through Don. I'm happy to do that.
That sounds, yeah. That sounds good. All right. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Enjoy it.
Okay. You bet.
Good night.
So you have that. And I'm going to mute and let these people in, okay?
Perfect.
All right. I think we're about ready to get started here. I'm going to wait just a minute here. Make sure everything's working like it should.